Welcome into Transfer Portal Palooza, presented by the Ultimate College Football Show. That's it. The spring transfer portal window has officially closed. A few more moves left to be made, but for the most part, this 2025 player acquisition period is over. So we're going to talk about all the major moves that have happened. And we talk about player acquisition. These are two fantastic guys to talk about who have spent time doing just that in front offices of Power 4 programs. We have Cooper Patagna, we have Smoke Dixon, I am Emily Proud, and I'll be your guide for the next few hours as we discuss everything that happened during the spring transfer portal window and also what happened just overall during this cycle. Let's tell you what's coming up on today's show. We're answering a lot of questions that you might have, like what's the latest on Madden Iamaliava? Our insider calls it a watershed moment for college football. Plus, who is the best fit of the spring window? We'll roll through teams who filled holes this cycle, how that will vault them into a playoff conversation this fall. But not every contender filled needs. Did Texas do enough to protect their quarterback, Arch Manning? We'll discuss that. Let's go ahead and show you some of those team portal rankings, how things have shaked out at the end of this. LSU with a big-time ad over the weekend. The number 4 defensive lineman, Bernard Gooden, that shot them back up to the number 1 portal class. We've also got Texas Tech making a ton of moves. Speaking of a ton of moves, we're just kind of used to this from Ole Miss. 28 total commits, Miami and Oregon rounding out that top 5. Now, if we look at the portal cycle as a whole, some of the top players in this cycle, only one of them came from the spring window, and that is the number 1 player, Nico Iamaliava. 3 total quarterbacks in the top 10. We've got Carson Beck to Miami, John Mateer going to Oklahoma, also some great edge and wide receiver prospects. So that's just 10 of the players. In total, we saw a ton of transfers over this portal cycle. Nearly 5,000 total entries in the 2024-2025 cycle. I'm not going to break down every single one of these numbers, but as you can see, there is a steady trend, and that trend just continues to go up. So you see these numbers, nearly 5,000 entering. What do you think of that, Smoke?
A lot of numbers.
It's a lot of players.
But when you look at it, Coop, we're talking about who are the real difference makers in this. Most of them are just 1 or 2 guys that can come into your building and really give you 1 or 2 wins, what we really care about. But everybody else is just a good ad. So now I'm thinking in my mind, how important is it for personnel departments to get it right, to make sure you get that right fit, to make sure that 1 or 2 spots that you need, you fill it the proper way with the right personnel in your building.
Emily, I think you had a stat earlier before we came on the show that you were telling me about less than 50%, so just around that 50% number of the portal entries this spring had less than 100 snaps in the previous season or in their career, right? So you think about that, and I think that's kind of the point. What are teams shopping for in this spring portal? When you think about us, the way that we've graded the players, obviously there's a lot that goes into it. Projected performance, what they're going to do collegiately, projected performance, what could they do at the NFL level. But let's think about how these guys could potentially impact their team. Out of all the spring portal entries, we only have 118 players that have an 87 rating or higher, which is what we would consider an above average to good starter, okay? We only have 20 draftable grades as well. And out of those 20 draftable grades, we only have 2 players that would be drafted on day 1 or day 2 with Nico Iamaliava and David Bailey. Both very kind of unique, circumstantial situations that they're going through. So right now, I think it's all about teams trying to find competitive depth and really try to plug 1 or 2 holes. If you're one of those teams out there that's trying to find 4 or 5 starters right now, that time to do that would have been in December. And this is a really hard time because now you're talking about players coming in, and it's going to be summer. You only have fall ball to really get acclimated with your new school. So everybody uses the portal differently. The spring portal, as close as they are, is very different to the winter portal as well.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about that there are only 2 players, like you said, that entered the spring portal window that you give a 1 or 2, or first or second round draft grade to. And it's not like there are some 3rd and 4th rounds. The next best is all 5 and beyond.
And I'm not even sure that we would see that again. I mean, you think about how unique Nico's situation is, and then you think about David Bailey and Troy Taylor gets fired kind of out of the blue, and the timing of that is kind of awkward. So it paints a pretty vivid picture about what's available in this market.
And it seems like you're telling me, Coop, you better get your guys early, because if you wait a little bit longer, you're just going to get guys they're just in there just to fit your depth to go into that long season.
And it's competitive. It's more expensive too. You know, it's really it's inflationary in the spring market because you have more competitors as well.
Yeah, there's a little bit more desperation. There's also the factor of the house settlement, which we'll get into on this show, all the changes with that some teams are trying to come down to the wire and spend. And just with there being a smaller pool and not being able to find those elite level players, like you said, yeah, it drives the price up. So from a general manager standpoint, what are you trying to accomplish during the spring window if you're not adding those elite level starters?
Well, the beautiful thing of getting through spring, you know exactly what your roster looks like. Mm-hmm. You went through December, you went through every single practice from injuries, from guys that you believe that should have taken a step, they didn't. So now you can come back and say, okay, we can truly evaluate what we need just to get through this season. We already have our starters on offense and defense, but what does that backup tackle look like? What does that swing tackle look like? We need to go out and add the next best of. What does that fifth cornerback look like? We need to go out and get that because the early enrollee that we're projecting to be ready to play just haven't picked up the defense. So you're just trying to figure out what are the right pieces that we need to finish out this season instead of trying to add in a starter because the starter's not there right now. And if you're looking for that, Coop, you're in a bad situation.
Right, and there's some guys out there like Bernard Gooden from South Florida for LSU. They needed depth on the defensive line, plus they get an above-average starter. You think about Bo Atkinson, Ohio State, probably not thinking that guy's going to be on the market, had 7.5 sacks last season. So teams are also in the position, the luxury position, really the contenders, to kind of say, okay, we have one spot that we'd love to have. And we talked about LSU a lot with that tackle spot. If the guy's not there, they also need to be cautious about spooking some of their younger guys away that haven't played yet, right? So there's a little bit of that game of cat and mouse kind of going on, evaluating, all right, where can we get better? But we also want to retain guys within this 10-day portal window as well.
But you also have to understand who you are and who you can afford to be. Like every team can't go out there and purchase a Bo Atkinson. Like you can't do that because financially and the resources you don't have. So, yeah, you can go out there and go get that guy, but everybody in your locker room is looking like, okay, you spent X amount on this guy. What about us? Because we might just be jumping in that portal tomorrow.
I love it. We are rocking and rolling here on the Spring Transfer Portal Palooza show. If you are watching us and enjoying it, or even if you're not enjoying it, it's free to hit that like button. So we do appreciate you. Go ahead and do that. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, well, we have the place for you to go for those questions, comments, and concerns. We love to hear from you during the show, so drop them in the chat. We are also, a very exciting thing we're doing here is we're on the road to 1 billion views. We are so close to reaching that goal. We could not have done it without you. So first off, thank you for watching. But one request, tell your friends. That would be much appreciative. We are 10 million away, which sounds like a lot, but billion with a B is a very high number to get to. So make sure that you spread the word of what we're doing here on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. And in honor of our pursuit, we are also holding a giveaway. We're giving out yearly VIP subscriptions. All you have to do to enter is to take a photo of you watching 24/7 Sports right here on YouTube. Share it using the hashtag Road to 1 billion. I'm hearing we've already given out a couple, so check your DMs. You could be a winner, and you may not even know it. So check those out. Well, when it's time to talk about transfer portal, there is one phone call we got to make, and that is to our portal insider, Chris Hummer, who has been tracking the nearly 5,000 transfer portal entrants. Every time I see you post that number, Chris, I just want to give you a virtual hug because I know that is a lot of players to go through. But a lot of things happened over the weekend that we want to recap. And the first one, defensive lineman Bernard Gooden committing to LSU, obviously a big ad for them. How'd they get it done?
They got it done pretty quickly. LSU was the only visit Bernard Gooden took during his process, and LSU was very aggressive to make sure he didn't take any other visits. And this is like such a critical ad for LSU. They had to get a defensive tackle in this market. There were very few impact players available. I was hearing Cooper talk about it earlier. Bernard Gooden is one of the very few DTs in this market who can step in right away and not only play at a place like LSU, but potentially thrive. He is like somebody that people in the personnel world view as a potential draft pick. He is somebody that elevates LSU's depth, but also potentially can start for them. Like defensive tackle is by far the weakest spot on their roster positionally, offense or defense. That was the big area of need for them. And after they got so many needs addressed in the winter, they had to get this one done in the spring if they want to reach their aspirations in 2025, which are playoff and national championship aspirations. And Bernard Gooden helps with that goal. And you could say that about very few players in the spring portal window.
Speaking about filling needs, Miami did that by way of adding wide receiver Keelan Marion out of BYU. Why was this such a necessary add for them, and how did they ultimately complete it?
Well, I think Miami would have loved to get a big X receiver this portal cycle. I don't know if that player, like a number one option, was available, especially after Ted Hurst, a Georgia State receiver, opted to return to school over the weekend. But to get Marion, one of the best all-purpose threats in the country, he was an All-American kick returner, had 2 kick return touchdowns last season, has had over 1,000 yards receiving in his career. It's still really big for a Miami wide receiver group that's really unproven. They lost their top 3 receivers from last year. Carson Beck's coming in like healthy during the summer, and he'll be throwing to a whole new group. And outside of CJ Daniels, who came in from LSU, formerly at Liberty, and Keelan Marion, those are really the only 2 proven, experienced people in the room. To get somebody who could work out of the slot like Keelan Marion can, and to be kind of a reliable target for Carson Beck is huge for them as they move into next year.
Yeah, an All-American kick returner as well. Penn State fans have been absolutely clamoring for their team to add some wide receiver talent, and they did it just a few days ago. Syracuse wide receiver Trevor Pena is now in the fold, and initially, Chris, this seemed like Miami is where we should be looking. They, of course, as we just said, got their wide receiver, but what did Penn State do there towards the end to lock this one up?
Big push. Trevor Pena was not cheap. He was the best slot receiver in the market, probably the most productive receiver in the market this cycle. And obviously Penn State needed to upgrade. We watched them in the college football semifinals not have a single receiver make a catch. That entire room is basically gone. Like, they had a big turnover at receiver. They brought in 2 transfers ahead of Trevor Pena from the portal, Devontae Ross from Troy, Kyron Hudson from USC. Trevor Pena joins that group, and now you have a whole new starting lineup for Drew Aller. And this is a year we've seen Penn State go all in a lot of ways, paying to get guys like Drew Aller, both their star running backs, to come back to school. Adding these receivers in the portal is just part of that puzzle piece. And Penn State, at least on paper, should have one of the best offenses in the country next year, largely because of the investments they've made in the portal at receiver and to get their guys to come back.
All right. Speaking of coming back, and one more wide receiver to ask you about, Micah Hudson is returning to Texas Tech. He said in a statement, quote, "I am back to finish what I started." So what did the Red Raiders do to help their 5-star find his way back home?
Wasn't gone for long, right? Like, he basically took a long Christmas break is basically what it came down to. He left in December, back in April. This is an interesting situation. He was obviously at Texas A&M for a very short time. I think he attended one workout basically before he decided to step away from the program. And I think for Texas Tech and Micah Hudson, it was always meant to be in a way. They just had to kind of figure out a way to make it work and come back together and maybe cobble or to kind of repair some hurt feelings on both sides. I think Texas Tech has long been a place Micah Hudson's had a lot of trust in, and he was the highest rated recruit in Texas Tech history. I think Micah Hudson is happy to be back, and I think he's been there a couple times, just hanging around practice and with the team, even leading up to his announcement this week. So I think it's a reunion that made a lot of sense, and I think it was a lot cheaper for Texas Tech this time around than it was the first time.
All right, Chris, most of the hay is already in the barn, as they say, when it comes to players that have found their destinations. There's still time, of course. You can't enter the portal anymore unless you're a grad transfer and lose your head coach. Either way, though, what do we keep in our...
Not even grad transfers anymore, just
okay.
head coaches.
Okay, just head coaches. Okay, well, thank goodness. Thank you for that clarification. What else should we be keeping an eye on, though?
I just did it for my heart, Emily. You scared me for a second.
You need it. Yes, for your sake. Is there anything else that we need to be paying attention to, though, for the rest of this summer and into the next couple weeks?
Yeah, I mean, there's still some big names on the board. Miami is going to be after a guy like AJ Halsey coming up from Houston. He's a 4-star transfer for us. I expect Miami to be in the mix for another DB here soon. We'll have some reporting on that in a bit at 247sports.com. Matt Zunitz and I have a VIP intel piece up right now about some of the top guys in the portal. Chamar Brown, the FCS Jerry Rice Award winner, who's the top freshman in the country, should be deciding later today. I'm seeing a Cal Miami battle for that one. There's several other top names still floating out there. So we're not quite done, but most of the hay is in the barn at this point, as they say.
I love it. Chris Summer, the more moves that are made, I'm sure you'll be all over it. We appreciate you, and you can check out more of his work at 247sports.com and cbssports.com. Chris, appreciate you. All right, let's move back here in studio and talk about some of the fits for these commits that happened over the weekend. Who stands out to you, Coop?
I'm going to go with Keelan Marion, and this was a guy that really, really liked, and we've talked about on this show, but Chris talked about the versatility as a return man. You can play him out of the slot. You can play him on the outside. The more I watch him, the more I think, all right, there is a lot more juice left to squeeze out of Keelan Marion. And if you're Miami, you can't let Carson Beck go into the same situation that he was in last year with Georgia, where they didn't give him enough talent on the perimeter. And Miami's done a good job here in the winter portal with C.J. Daniels coming over from LSU. Now Keelan Marion they bring over in the spring. But it's still a little bit of a numbers game. I wouldn't be shocked if Miami goes out there, tries to find one more receiver, because the guys behind, Malachi Toney, JoJo Trader, Nye Carr, those guys are young, talented, but inexperienced, right? And you're going all in with a $4.5 million quarterback. You got to make it work. So I like the fact they've been aggressive. There's not a lot left out there for Miami at receiver. So going to be fascinated to see if they can pull in another one. But they need it. This guy had to have it. So kudos to them for getting it done.
Yeah, Coop, and it's more of an experience deal. Because when you look at it production-wise, it's okay. But when you want experience, you want to make sure that those young, talented receivers that you do have that are in next year's crop can show up in game 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and finish out the season. But to get to 5 and 6, you got to get through 1 through 4. And most of the time, young guys aren't ready for that moment. And sometimes that moment can get too big. But as a coach and as a personnel staff, you have to understand that. And going through spring, the beauty of going through spring and hitting this window is now I can say, you know what? I need a veteran, because my quarterback needs a reliable target that understands the college game, and we don't have any setbacks on our offense.
And this is like a all-in type of year for Miami. And in some ways it should have been last year, right, with the number one pick in the draft in Cam Ward. But they have a guy that they feel really confident about in Carson Beck, who has shown that he can play a high level of college football. So you can't go into 2025 the way they went into 2024 with the DBs. This year it would be the receivers. So like I said, be interesting if they add another one, but good job by them getting Keelan Marion. They had to come out with something, and he was one of the best players available.
I know you really like this Trevor Pena move for Penn State. What is it about the fit?
Oh, man, I love it. Just because you're getting a guy in a slot. You lost Tyler Warren to the NFL, and he was essentially your middle-of-the-field player. Right now they went through spring. Devontae Ross, when we checked him out, he was more of a gadget slot receiver, but more of an explosive slot guy. Not a guy that can get you 3rd and 6, big-time catch. But Pena comes in. He's shown you what he can do in the slot. Size, strength, plays bigger, strong hands, can pick up first downs. And when you have a quarterback that's NFL ready, you have a guy on the outside right now, Kyron Hudson. Big receiver that you can say, you know what, I'm going to throw the ball up to him in the red zone. You have a gadget, speed, take the top off of special team player in Ross. Now Pena comes in, and now it just completes your entire offense. I can run the ball at you, give you play-action pass. But we saw where Penn State came into trouble last year. When it was 3rd and 6, you could take away Tyler Warren. And you know where that tight end was going to be aligned. But now you have Pena that can play Z, slot, move around, and knows how to defeat zone and man coverage just from his time spent on task in Syracuse.
Similar to last year. I wish they had one more guy. Bigger body X, a little bit more explosive, a little bit more dynamic. That being said, another team that I think did enough for Drew Aller.
I love it. If you want to read more about some of these top prospects and also the ones that are still trying to find a home, head to 247sports.com for all the latest transfer portal news. Speaking of the latest transfer portal news, let's talk about some of the biggest storylines of the spring, and really none bigger than the Nico bombshell that dropped on April 12th. The former Vols quarterback, no longer part of the team after an NIL dispute. He then became the #1 player in the portal and landed with UCLA. Then, presumptive Bruins starting quarterback Joey Aguilar hit the portal and landed with the Vols. So we had ourselves a little unintentional quarterback trade. And for more on all the biggest storylines that happened during this cycle, let's welcome in national college football analyst for CBSSports.com, Richard Johnson. I have a very simple question, RJ. Who won the trade here?
Well, I guess you could kind of say Tennessee. They were able to shed some salary, and they were able to at least I would say break even at the position. So in that respect, I guess the Vols won the trade, Emily.
But could you argue with UCLA that they might have gotten the better quarterback? What is it in terms of adding wins? Who won the trade?
Yeah, I think UCLA got better when they upgraded from Aguilar to Nico Iamaleava. I thought Iamaleava was the thing that held Tennessee's offense back from its true potential. When I look at this Tennessee offense and what it did against power conference opponents, basically from the Arkansas game on, there was a blueprint about how to at least slow Tennessee down. It was rush 3, drop 8, and if Dylan Sampson beats you, that's okay, but you're not going to run that system like Hendon Hooker did and score 50 points on us. Defenses were clear, and Iamaleava was unable to get over that, unable to pilot this Tennessee offense to the heights that we saw even with Joe Milton the year before. They ended up being a more smash-mouth outfit, and they played defense, and that's really what got them to the playoff. It wasn't him. So as far as UCLA is concerned, yeah, I think UCLA adding Iamaleava and also Javian Thomas, the running back from Cal, yeah, UCLA, the Bruins absolutely get better on offense.
All right. Well, the Iamaleava has really kept us on our toes during this spring transfer portal cycle because there's news on younger brother as well with Madden Iamaleava. He hit the portal. The first-year quarterback hasn't even played a snap yet, but he's expected to transfer from Arkansas to join his brother at UCLA. Some backstory. This is, of course, after flipping from UCLA to Arkansas on National Signing Day. But now it sounds like that Arkansas is looking to recoup some of that NIL money. Let's hear from Brandon Marcello with more.
This decision by Arkansas's NIL Collective to potentially pursue legal action against Madden Iamaleava and also Desmond James is a watershed moment in the ongoing professionalization of college athletics. Arkansas going after about $200,000 in buyout money that it says it is owed from Madden's team after he left Arkansas after only being there for 4 months. He signed a 1-year deal with the NIL Collective there that was going to pay him $500,000 for the year, according to our sourcing at 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports. Meanwhile, Desmond James, a receiver, he signed a deal at Arkansas and then left just a few days later before he was able to even really collect on that deal. But they're asking for buyout money because he signed that deal as well. Arkansas goes out and hires a prominent sports attorney to pursue all this, Tom Mars, who's been involved in the NCAA and athletic space for a long time, about a decade or so. He represented, by the way, a little twist here, Nico Iamaleava in that whole ongoing situation when the NCAA was investigating Tennessee about a year ago. Meanwhile, Desmond James has a new lawyer, a notable one as well, Darren Heitner, who's been a player's advocate over the years. This is something that's really going to heat up. Will it go to court? Everybody in college athletics is watching because for the first time publicly, we're seeing a school's NIL collective go after players and their collective money, what they believe is a buyout, really setting a precedent here that everybody's going to be watching across college athletics.
All right, Brandon, I think maybe said the word lawyer or lawsuit at least like 6 times. RJ, I know we just want to talk about football, but it is April. This is a major storyline when it comes to the future for NIL. So what sort of message does this potentially send to prospects when you see a collective say, we're coming to collect?
Well, I'll say this. There are a whole lot of schools and a whole lot of collectives that are watching this very closely because there's a whole lot of schools and a whole lot of collectives that would like to do what Arkansas has done and basically try to go after what they feel like is money owed to them. Look, is this ever going to go to court? And this is just my prediction here. This is not going to see the light of day in a court of law. I think if we take Iamaleava's number, it's about $200,000 Arkansas is looking to recoup. I think there's a lot of numbers between $0 and $200,000. I think lawyers get in the room. I think lawyers pick one that makes both sides feel okay about it, and we settle here. I do not think this sees its day in court, discovery, all those words that lawyers typically would like to avoid, especially athletic programs.
Yes, we're already hearing from both lawyers, which has been fun to continue to monitor this saga. But it initially started with a statement from Hunter Yurachek, the athletic director at Arkansas. And I think a big reason for doing that was to alert the fans to say, hey, your money is going towards players who are with us. We're not just, burning it or on players that aren't actually going to play for us. So there's a fan element to this. And RJ, I think a lot of fans, too, want to know that if this does hold up in court, if they are able to recoup some of that money, how could this potentially affect player movement, if at all?
Well, at the end of the day, Arkansas has got to try to replace Madden Imaliava. They got to try to replace Desmond James. They're going to need some money to do that. So, part of the reason why buyouts or liquidated damages exist in contracts is so that the entity that is being left can then be made whole to go continue to do business and pursue other people. It's the same thing with coaches. It's why a G5 team is owed a buyout, or why an SEC team is owed a buyout if their coach goes to the NFL. Like, there are reasons, damages, there's a reason for them. There's a reason for the protection that they have in these contracts. And at the end of the day, are these contracts real contracts if they're not enforceable, if they're not even going to be attempted to be enforced? I mean, at the end of the day, what we've got right now is an ongoing, perpetual negotiation period between player and school. I mean, that's effectively what's going on or what went on, I should say, with Nico Iamaleava in Tennessee, the multiple times coming at bites at the apple to try to get a raise. At the end of the day, these contracts have to be actually real. They have to be guardrails. They have to be something that both parties are going to stick to. And if you would like to break a contract, well, there's going to be a cost to it. So I understand from the school's perspective why they're pursuing money that they feel is owed.
I know that your question, are these contracts real, is supposed to be hypothetical, but I can answer that for you. No. But we could potentially find out if there is some realism to them based on what happens with this story. But Richard Johnson, thank you so much for breaking down some of the biggest storylines of this spring transfer portal window. All right, so we're going to head back here in studio and talk a little bit more about this, because I do think it is kind of interesting. I mean, our friend Brandon Marcello referred to it as a watershed moment when it comes to college athletics. Again, this is if it goes through, if there's a lawsuit, if they're able to. So there's a lot of ifs involved, but I heard you nodding along to a lot of what RJ said. What is it that you took away from that conversation?
Yeah, Coop, if was a fifth, we'll all be drunk right now, right? Coop, that money's spent. You're not seeing any of it, and I get it. You want to shine the light on saying, you guys just can't come in here, take our money, and leave. The next one that comes in, there might be a chance that we might tap your pockets. But you know what? I remember running into this situation back in 2003 with Charles Rogers. Charles Rogers did some things in his contract, and I remember Matt Millen walking down to Charles and tapping Charles on the shoulder while he walked down. I said, Charles, I need to talk to you. So went over, came back, and said, Smoke, they're asking me for some of that signing bonus back. Don't they know that money is spent? Same thing Madden saying, money gone. Good luck trying to catch me. Replace me, let the fans feel good about it, but there's probably 1%, maybe zero, I'll go to zero, that they get a dime of that back.
Money's gone, but like we talked about this last time, I think they're trying to make an example. It's less about the $200,000 and more about the protection that the schools and the programs are trying to put in place. And you brought it up with Jasmine James, you brought it up with Madden Imaliava. He went through spring ball. Those are valuable reps that KJ Jackson or Grayson Wilson could have had. That is now in Los Angeles, California, and that's money invested. So for these teams, I think they're just trying to make an example of a player who's saying, hey, we signed these contracts. Are they enforceable or not? And to RJ's point, might not recoup the $200,000, but a settlement of maybe half or maybe $50K is something that can go a long way, because they need to replace those bodies as well in the transfer portal. I know everybody thinks money's being thrown around like it's candy, but teams need to find a way to replenish their funds and go out and acquire players.
Coop, the only thing I would say to Arkansas is just be careful, because in recruiting, a lot of things get dirty. And if the recruiting process wasn't really clean, and some of us stuck our hand in the cookie jar when some of us shouldn't have been on campus, or impermissible phone calls, yeah, those things would come out. So do you just walk away just saying, you know what, for the next person, this is what's going to happen, but we want to leave this one alone? Because at the end of the day, you don't want to start just rehashing up old, dirty wounds that can get really ugly for everybody that had something to do with it.
I'd also have a hard time watching $400,000 just walk out the door between two players within a spring ball.
Playing for you.
Right. So I get both sides of it. I understand what you're saying, but financially I can see where they're coming from on this.
Yeah, very interesting situation. We'll see how that continues to develop. And speaking of all legal matters, we have another one that we need to talk to, which is about the House settlement. And so we bring in our legal eagle from Cover 3 podcast, Bud Elliott. And last week we learned that Judge Claudia Wilken delayed the House settlement approval over roster limits. We'll get to the specific issue of roster limits in just a little bit. But obviously this House settlement, all eyes were on Revshare, Revshare, Revshare. So how does this delay affect that?
All right, so there's still a really good chance that this gets done by the end of the summer on the initial timeline that we had. Judge Wilken said that, hey, y'all, my preliminary approval of this did not mean that you were automatically going to get final approval for this. She did give some, obviously, like some questions that she had to give to the NCAA as far as the roster limits. When do they need to actually be implemented? Are they going to be permanent? And I think she basically kind of walked the NCAA down like an obvious timeline and way to implement it that maybe she thinks she could. It also makes it look like the settlement was given more due consideration by the judge before she just stamps this thing as, yep, looks good to go, right? If she gets some suggestions for it, looks like, hey, this was, some due diligence was done, some actual feedback was given, and the settlement was improved for all parties, and maybe some of the guys who weren't represented, like some of these walk-ons, are now a little more represented and accounted for, especially in some of these Olympic sports, with the suggestion that, hey, yeah, the 105 and all that kind of stuff, fine with that more down the line. Let's kind of slow walk that thing and maybe implement it over the course of a 4 or 5 year span. So I think if you're working in a front office right now, you're like, what number are we actually going to be at this fall? But it's not going to hold up the whole House settlement, I don't think.
Yeah, her concerns are valid because, as we've already seen, this is happening. These front offices are preparing to get down to that 105 number. Kenny Dillingham from Arizona State actually spoke on this last week. Let's listen to him.
Yeah, obviously we've already informed some of the guys that they're not going to be in the 105, and that was just because you don't have to tell them till August. Well, they can't transfer in August, so you're just going to tell a kid in August he can't play football, and then it uses a year of eligibility. That's wrong. We can use up to 120, and there's really no limit in camp. But we're not going to do that because I don't think that's right for the kids. I think what's right for the kids is give them the bad news now. And if they want to go play football, they can go play football. I didn't make those rules, but I was not about to hold those guys here, use them for fall camp, and then get rid of them on August 30th. That's just not right.
I mean, Bud, the reason that I wanted to show that clip and we're talking about this on Transfer Portal Palooza is because I just keep imagining there are players that couldn't find roster spots. So how does this, maybe those preemptive cuts, affect some players' ability to now find those spots?
It's a great question. I mean, ultimately, it's going to come down to how do they implement this slow roll, if that is indeed what the NCAA ends up doing, coming back to the table, agreeing to that, so that this settlement can get expedited and approved and implemented in time for this 2025 college football season. Obviously, some teams were definitely carrying more than 105 when you account for all the walk-ins, a lot of teams actually. So you may end up having more spots on some teams this fall if you include some of the walk-ons, if this thing is rolled out sort of piecemeal as opposed to just all right at once. So you may end up having a few more spots, although obviously not as many scholarships, most likely, the way I read it, what she said.
Yeah, and another thing that we discussed with this spring transfer portal window and just the transfer portal cycle in general is that all these teams were offloading a bunch of money because eventually they were going to be held accountable. So how does this potentially affect spending?
Well, certainly it could be very difficult to get all the review done of all these deals in time for fall. Like an expedited timeline, I don't know if this clearinghouse is going to have time to operate within this space. No, I think all these teams were really smart to try to front load these deals and get them in all under the wire, so to speak, before this clearinghouse, which is going to be done by a major accounting firm, is actually implemented. Of course, we also think that's probably going to get challenged in court. I don't know if it's going to hold up in court, but we do know that per the terms of the deal, if you got your stuff done before the clearinghouse was even implemented, obviously it's grandfathered in as good to go under the old system. So I think that is here to stay. If this thing did get pushed back so much that it's not implemented until 2026 football season, then you have even bigger concerns there and probably more wild spending next year.
pushed back. I feel like that's a term we hear a lot when it comes to lawsuits. And once again, here we are. But Elliot, thank you so much for breaking that down for us. Once again, the ultimatum has been set to May 7th. So maybe we'll get some clarity here in about a week. But you can listen to Bud on the Cover 3 podcast. It's almost summer, which means it's almost time for some summer school. Learn about all the major programs and get ready for the season with the Cover 3 podcast. Coop, take it away.
Smoke, I feel like I should have gotten a law degree. I don't know why I went into player personnel and recruiting and everything else. My head's getting ready to explode. I saw a couple seasons of Suits, but I'm not prepared for this. So let's talk some football. Obviously, given your experience, I'm a little interested to kind of get your opinion on how do you navigate such a space of uncertainty in your position where you don't know what you're going to be able to carry on your roster, what that looks like, and then being able to balance short-term, long-term, and then most importantly, the players benefit of this as well.
Coop, I don't. And that's what most head coaches are saying, and most personnel guys are saying as well, too. I sat down and I made several phone calls over the last month and a half just to try to get some understanding of what they're really going through in each building. There are some teams that truly benefit off of really good walk-ons that can help you in your 120. And now that you're telling me I got to get rid of 15 good players that I know are going to be beneficial to my program, how do I set my practice? Case in point, at the University of Maryland, they have the thing called 3-spot. You know what that is. You have first team, second team, and third team on 3 different fields. And that's to help out the development of everyone on the team. Because Coach Lockley's thing was I never wanted any player to be sitting around without them being able to get coached or valuable reps. So if I have to cut it down to 105, now the practice plan totally changes. I have to go to now either 1.5 or 2 spots where I only have 2 teams going against each other. Now, how do I struggle in practice? I can't get enough reps. My young guys aren't going to get developed at the speed that I once thought they were going to, so that affects my roster. In terms of being a general manager now, instead of filling those spots with walk-ons, the third team offensive lineman, the third team or fourth quarterback, that 6th or 7th running back that you send down on practice squad or that look team to give that defense a good look, you don't have that anymore. And now when you talk about how much can I spend, what is my cap number? Well, you're just wishing, hoping, and spending. But again, we just talked about a lawsuit, spending, players getting promised money that might come back and make you look like the bad guy because the money that you thought you were going to have allocated to that player is now getting cut short.
Let me ask you a question about this. You have 85 scholarships. That number goes to 105. You could carry 125, I believe, with the walk-ons. What happens to these guys? And then how do teams that get the additional 20 scholarships, what do they do with that? Because my first thought on this is not everybody's going to look at the back third of the roster and say, well, we're going to try to find the type of walk-on caliber talent that can come in here and give us a look. I think teams are going to look at those 20 spots and they're going to look at it from a developmental standpoint and say, all right, how can we find guys that one day potentially end up growing and developing as potential starters in our program?
But it all depends on what school that you're at. If you're at a school that can afford to have developmental players, yes. But you and I both know those developmental players, you're not going to be able to coach them because the second that they get into a game, a year or so, guess what, Coop? They're in the portal as well.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. You and I are both on, like, wake us up when it ends, right? It just seems like one of those things that continuously drags out, so we'll see what happens there. Let's talk a little bit about some of our favorite spring portal additions. I want to start in Columbus because you and I have talked a lot about this guy. Think about Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau. Both those guys have departed for the NFL draft. Ohio State, obviously trying to defend their national championship run. They bring in Bo Atkinson, and it came down to Georgia in Ohio State. You think about this guy, only a sophomore, 7.5 sacks last season, and another guy that kind of can remind you a little bit of Jack Sawyer in some ways, a really high-floor pass rusher, but also productive as well. Tell us why this guy's going to impact Ohio State next season.
Well, Coop, look at it like this. Ohio State's one of the few teams that intentionally go into the portal, understanding their true needs. Like, they went through this entire spring and gave those young guys an opportunity. But with Bo being able to come in and give you that same impactful intensity, being able to play the 3 technique and defensive end and give you that production in terms of affecting the quarterback that JT and Jack left you with, you don't have to think about what those young guys are going to do when they go out there and horseshoe. You know what Bo is going to do when he gets out there. All he's been is an effective defensive end that can impact the run game and the pass game with production.
14 guys drafted over the weekend for Ohio State. Easy money for them. They seem to do that every year. Mark Pantoni, one of the best in the business. Only 8 transfer commits at this point. You look at everybody else in the country, even some of the best teams, the contenders, they're north of double digits. If you could build it one way, would you build it like Ohio State's building it, leaning so much on the high school side, getting to the point of continuity, they know who they are, and then just sprinkling a little flavor via the portal?
See, the word that you use is continuity. Like, they've all, on the offensive side, for the most part, other than a coordinator coming in there in or out, they understand exactly what they need on their offensive side and on their defense because that head coach has been there. So when you go there and you recruit, you can say, I'm going to build through the high school level. And if those young guys that we were depending on didn't get developed as fast as we're going to think they were supposed to, it's okay. We can go out because we have the proper resources to go out and get the right pieces to fit this puzzle, a la what Will Howard did last year when they had to let one quarterback go to bring in a quarterback to make sure that this Ohio State train does not stop.
Yeah, you like what they're doing on the offensive line too. Probably 2 more guys out there each side of the line of scrimmage that I think they're trying to add. All right, a name that I really like, you and I have spent a lot of time talking about him, about Elo Madozi from Army, West Point. And, you know, you look at Georgia, and I think a lot of people look at Jalen Walker. They look at Michael Williams, Shaz Chambliss, all these guys. Damian Wilson, they lose him in the portal. And I bring up Elo Madozi because, well, he's got a little bit of Jalen Walker in him, his ability to play on ball, off ball. Guy had 6.5 sacks last season. We've talked a lot about this guy's background. This is going to be a fascinating one from a case study standpoint. Seeing a guy that used to be a receiver in high school, was 6'3", 195 pounds. He has put on 50 pounds in college. And that's hard to do at West Point because you typically have to keep your weight down to a certain point for military training. So Elo Madozi is going to make the jump from West Point to the teeth of the SEC there in Athens. I love this kid, his ability to get after the passer. Georgia needed this, and we talked about it at the top of the show. Spring portal is for some of those guys in there that you don't expect to be in, that you feel can add something a little bit different. I think the floor for Madozi is you get an excellent depth guy that can give you some DPR ability, and the ceiling is, hey, this guy could grow into a day 2, maybe potentially even day. Like that's how high it is. He's got a ways to go, but man, the flashes are special.
Well, when you bring somebody into that environment, Coop, what you're banking on is iron sharpen iron. Like, he's been around good players, but he's not been around elite players with elite training, elite coaching, because that's what Georgia's known for. Georgia's known to get defensive ends, outside linebackers that can pass rush. Nolan Smith, Jalen Walker, Michael Williams. So when you go out there and you get a young man that has untapped potential, raw clay, he's shown you the ability to gain 50 pounds, like you said, at West Point. Now, what is he going to do in Athens with all that nutrition, coaching, rehab, prehab? We might be looking at a 10-sack guy that they just hit on late in the portal, but they did really good research listening to you.
Howie Roseman already has this guy on his radar right now, ready to pick him at 28 through 32.
Howie's been listening to you, just like Kirby has.
All right, well, let me ask you a question. You've been a little bit tough on Kirby Smart and really kind of banging the drum for, hey, bring a general manager in there. You need another voice in there. What do you think about what they've been able to do so far this spring?
I think they've attacked it the right way. And again, you have to look at Georgia just like you look at Ohio State. They've done so well in high school recruiting that 1 or 2 pieces, the right pieces, making intentional moves, are the real plays for those teams, not for everybody else. Because, again, resources, they can go out and go get whoever they want, when they want, how they want.
All right, we got a under the radar, if you want to call it that, us in the transfer portal world. This is one of the bigger additions of the spring. Joe Cotton, left tackle from South Dakota. You turned me on to him. 6'7", 310 pounds. Really good South Dakota offensive line. They had another tackle go to Vandy and Bryce Henderson. But this was a huge get for Cincinnati. They had a big need at tackle. There's rumors out there that he went for north of $2 million. You see the tape here against Wisconsin. I thought he held up well. Could end up even being a guy that plays on the right side at the Power 4 level for Cincinnati. So we'll see what happens there. But what do you like about Joe Cotton, his fit at the Power 4 level?
Big, nasty, firm offensive lineman that has really good athleticism. Like, you look at him like, oh, he's not a good. No, second-level production. Getting off of the second level, sealing, always on his feet, running his feet on contact. But Cincinnati's retooling that offensive line. And when you retool your offensive line, you need a big-time get. This is a big-time get, and that just not by the 6'7", 315 pounds. His overall ability, he can start on 90% of most teams in college football. They got a steal with Joe Cotton.
Yeah, and we had a late day 3 grade on him. He's easily, I think, one of those guys, if he plays well at this level, could work his way up the board in a hurry. I talked a little bit earlier about Keelan Marion. You as a general manager, you're looking at that room in Miami, that receiver room. You have Carson Beck. Obviously, you're invested in him. You have a very salty and experienced offensive line. You know that's going to be a really good unit under Mario Cristobal. And you got a north-south run game with Jordan Lyle and Mark Fletcher. Do you think that they've done enough between Keelan Marion and C.J. Daniels, and you got the 3 young pups that got to grow up as well? How would you feel if you were at Miami right now going into the season where the pressure's on to win an ACC championship?
Knowing who's coaching that position, Kevin Beard, I believe one of the better receiver coaches in the United States in terms of developing young talent. When you get a guy like this in Marion, coming in with explosive, take the top off of your defensive play ability, speed, burst, and just he's ready. Like, he's never been a guy or the guy. You're going into a situation right now with arguably the best quarterback for NFL scouts in college football, with a receiver-friendly scheme without a lot of production that's in that room right now. So you're going in saying, I'm the veteran. I'm coming into the spring, and you know why I'm coming here. I'm not coming here to mess around and be a good leader. I'm coming here for one thing, production. Get the ball to me. And they've not been afraid of getting the ball to their receivers, except Xavier Restrepo that went undrafted, but highly, highly productive player. You take Keelan Marion and put him in that position, design plays for him, because you don't need to design a ton, because he can get open on his own. Get the ball into him. I think you're going to get more explosive plays and big play opportunities to make Carson Beck look good, because you made an investment in him too. So you have to make sure that investment shows off and pays off with talent around him.
We're going to find out how good of a player he is, because to Miami's point, I think Marion's one of those guys that you watch on tape. Athletically, he's extremely gifted. You see his ability in the return game, but now it's about getting the opportunities. He's going to have that at Miami. He's going to have the first real opportunity to have more than 30 receptions in a year. I expect a lot more out of him. He's a Sunday player as well. All right, let's go to the trenches. Guy that you liked, Alabama A&M. You brought it up today. Alabama A&M getting picked over right now in the transfer portal. But Cedric Smith going to your old stomping grounds in College Park at Maryland. What do you like about the IDL?
Well, just showing up there, you've lost 5 defensive linemen. You lost 4 to graduation, 2 to the NFL draft, Tommy Kimbasute, and you also lost Jordan Phillips to the Miami Dolphins. Now what you need is to replenish that defensive line. Coach Locks understands the Big Ten better than most coaches in that division, because he's been there since he was at Illinois as well too. And when you go into the Big Ten, what Maryland's done in the last few years, they've added beef. But when you lose out on production and beef, strength, point of attack, ability to go through a 13-game season, and if you study Maryland, they usually start off pretty good. Then as they go throughout the season, you see them start getting beat up. And guys are going to miss games. But now that's when you get into the proper management of that defensive line. And that's when Cedric comes in. That's when Joel Starling's another guy that they picked up in terms of adding beef. We talked about Texas adding in beef. Now they were tier 1 beef. But now Maryland's coming in with this young man, point of attack, thumper, stout, and he's going to give you a little bit more pass rush than most people think, because now Maryland's changed that defense. It's not a 3-4 anymore, Coop. It's a 4-down defense that gives you more of an attack, one-gap penetration.
How attractive are the young defensive linemen that have multi-year eligibility, like a guy like Ced Smith?
I love those guys. Just because you and I talked about it earlier, one of the most undervalued positions in college football is to properly assess the development of defensive linemen and offensive linemen. typically we give up on them too quickly. Like if they're not coming in and knocking guys back off the ball, and if they get moved, oh, yeah, he can't play. No, those guys take time because what they do is they get in the weight room, they get hardened up, strengthened up, and you have to learn how to play against strain. Most of us don't understand what strain means. Strain means you get 700 pounds walking you back, and at some point you have to wake up and say, you know what? I'm going to kick the crap out of these two guys, and it's not going to happen to me anymore. And it's not that easy of just saying, this is who I am. No, you get developed into that by training that way for years to get the understanding to do that.
All right, believe it or not, we're 30, 40 minutes into the show, if I had to guess, and we haven't talked about North Carolina yet, so we got to get that in. I want to talk a little bit about Gio Lopez and what he kind of brings to the table from South Alabama, and this is a guy that is better categorized as a high-floor game manager, but he can do some things on the ground, had over 400 yards rushing as well. North Carolina's quarterback situation before this spring, pretty sticky, right? Is it going to be Max Johnson? Was it going to be Ryan Brown, who transferred in from Purdue? Was it going to be the young freshman that they have a lot of confidence in there as well? I think it's going to be Gio Lopez, and one of those guys that can win the room over pretty quickly. The way that he marries up with Freddie Kitchens, the offensive coordinator over there, I thought this was one of the stealthiest pickups, even though it's North Carolina and there's going to be a lot of buzz, and this one's not going to fly under the radar. I like this pickup because I think it matches the timeline. It's a high floor timeline. It's like, let's not go all in. They didn't push for a Nico Imaliava. Maybe the price wasn't right, but this was a guy that they valued and they loved the fit as well. And I think from a competitive standpoint, it's going to have a minute.
This is a 6 to 8 win quarterback. And in your first year, Belichick and Lombardi going in, that's all you can hope for because really you have to comb through this roster, purge out the guys that you don't want, get the ones that you do want in, and get through your first high school year of recruiting. And when you have a quarterback that's been through it, understands how to play the game, has mobility, right? We all understand that the biggest factor in college football to me, the equalizer, is a mobile quarterback that can process quickly and run the RPO game. And that's what he does well.
Smoke, great job. We managed to get through an entire segment without Emily Proud. She is back on set, thank the Lord.
Oh, my gosh.
Emily, good to have you back.
Yeah, well, I had to spend some time in the YouTube chat because that's where things are popping. So I'm going to go ahead and just join you and ask you some questions. By the way, thank you so much for being in the YouTube chat. We love to follow along. Hit that like button if you have not already. Marcus Cartrell is asking, do you think some coaches are against hiring a general manager because of how much power the GM is bestowed? For example, Andrew Luck and Stanford firing their coach. Who should I go to first? Let's do something.
Come on to me. I'll take that. Don't even worry about it. I don't think it's really power. I think it's more of understanding how to have a working relationship with a partner. Because you're both invested into this team. I just can't call plays on third down. But again, I've always said it. All the coach is, you just tell me what you want. What do you want your team to look like? You paint that picture, and I will go get the paint, the paintbrush, the canvas, and get that done for you. So it's not power. It's delegating responsibility of your team. Like, I can't go out there and say, I want that defensive tackle, because you don't have enough time to study that defensive tackle. But if you say I want defensive line men, I'm going to bring you a board of 15 guys. And just like you broke it down earlier, here goes 2 that can impact us right now. Here goes 7 that are good starters. And here goes the rest are good developmental players. Now, if we need 3, coach, which 3 do you want? Because we only have $750,000 to purchase 3 of them. You can get 1 and cost you $750,000, or we can split that up. And I think that's where the coaches and the general managers have to understand that's the partnership of the way that college football is being ran right now in the modern day act of what we have as collegiate sports.
Right. And Chris Peterson used to say, he said, Coop, you're just the caddy. I want you to be the caddy. Let me know if I need a 9-iron or a pitching wedge or whatever it is. I like to think, hey, you're really the one grocery shopping. You're going to get the ingredients for the chef, and that's an important part of the process as well. And you think about it at the end of the day, who makes the meal? It's the coaches and the staff, but the ingredients are a big part of the process as well. And I think that's kind of the way to look at it. It's not so much power. It's about autonomy. Mm-hmm. Being a coach and cultivating a culture, not to mention the hiring process that you have to go through for everybody on your staff, not to mention the talent acquisition process as well with your players, that's a full-time job. So you have to have somebody that you can delegate to, that you can trust, that there needs to be a natural little strain in the relationship that can also challenge the way that you're thinking about things on a day-to-day basis. And a big part of the job is also to keep you one step ahead of the competition. It is hard for one person to have the mental capacity to always be thinking about one thing. If you're thinking about coaching and developing and scheme, it's hard to be thinking about personnel, what you need to do for the roster 1 to 2 to 3 years down the line. Also a house settlement and how that impacts that. Imagine that, right? This is a 24/7, 365 type of job. So to answer that question, I think a lot of coaches like the autonomy of saying, hey, I'm judge, jury, executioner at the end of the day. Nobody's challenging that. But what we're seeing in college football is we're getting more experienced, more prudent talent evaluators, more big picture thinkers that can take a bigger bite out of the apple. So how do you kind of balance that relationship? And that's what it is. It's a partnership. And if they don't look at it like that, that's honestly a little bit of detriment to them and to the program as well.
There's just so much to have to keep track of right now in this day and age of college football. So yeah,
Think about if you're a head coach.
Seems nice. Yeah, I know. It's crazy, but that's why they get paid the big bucks, literally. Marcus, thank you so much for that great question. I also came back to tell you about the top 10 team portal rankings. I have to do it because Coop just gets a little too excited about LSU there at the top. I'm more measured here. But if you're like him and your team is on here, you have a lot of hope at this point in the offseason. But are you a contender? And did you fill your needs? That is a question that we are going to answer. How did these contenders fill the needs that they had coming in to the offseason? Oregon is one of your favorite classes. What did they do that made them better?
It's funny because they haven't done a lot, but the things that they have done, they've done it right. So you look at what Oregon has brought in. I mean, they're going to replace 3 starters on the offensive line. You think about Isaiah World coming in, one of the top players in the country, one of 3 guys that we had a 5-star grade on in the transfer portal. Emmanuel Pregnon comes over from USC, a guy that's played a lot of football between his time at USC in Wyoming. And then Alex Harkey, a guy that I really like that comes over from Texas State. So it gives offensive line coach Alik Terry a lot of different parts, and all these guys match the MO of what Dan Lanning wants to be at the point of attack, not to mention guys like Dylan Theineman that come over from Purdue. If you're a junkie looking at 2026 NFL mock drafts, you'll see that name in there as well. So Teron Johnson, they've added. Jamari Johnson, they've added from Louisville. All guys that they've kind of been connected to at some point in their recruiting process as well. So Oregon has been tactful. And if you look at Oregon the first couple years of Dan Lanning, it's been ultra aggressive in the portal, and they've done a really good job scouting that. Now they're letting those top 5 recruiting classes develop on their own timeline. And now it's back to the way they want it, which is organic setup of we're going to build through the high score ranks and we're going to supplement through the transfer portal, and expect them to be big buyers both in December, in the winter, every single year. That's how they'll be. But it would be more kind of like the Ohio State equation now that they're through those first 3 years where they wanted to contend and they were able to do that successfully. They're on to the next chapter of the book under Dan Lanning now.
They're attacking it the right way, Coop. They're understanding that, again, it's the Big Ten. And what do you need in the Big Ten? You need offensive linemen, defensive linemen, solid quarterback play, but you need to be able to control the clock and control the ball in any time needed. You can get in those games that you can have a shootout, but we know in December and November when it starts to get cold, the weather changes, inclement weather, you got to lean on those big guys and get down in the trenches to win games. And I think Coach Land has figured that out, and that's where he's aiming in terms of getting veteran offensive linemen to come in and play.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of the Big Ten, we watched 14 of Ohio State's players from the national championship team get drafted over the weekend. So I see that number, and I think they have a lot of needs to fill. So how do they do it?
Well, Coop, like we talked about, offensive line play again. Like they lost their 2 offensive tackles. Right? They went back into the portal and got 2 of the better ones. Right? Went in and struck in, went down to Rice and got Ethan Oniwa. One I really love, firm, at point of attack. When you want to run the ball to the left side, yeah, you can get behind that big fella and run the ball. Then they go out and in their backyard at Minnesota and get Phillip Daniels. A starting right tackle, you lose 2, you get 2. Because the importance of controlling the line of scrimmage, protecting the quarterback, being able to run the ball, and dial up plays to your favorite receiver, Jeremiah Smoke Smith, is what you need. And I think they attacked it the proper way of getting those 2 veteran offensive linemen.
Yeah, 2 other names that we haven't talked about, C.J. Donaldson and Max Clare. C.J. Donaldson, the running back that comes over from West Virginia. You think about Judkins and Travion Henderson, both those guys being top 50 picks in this year's NFL draft. So what is it going to look like? I think Ohio State, always really good about having a committee approach and having fresh legs there. So I like that addition. The other one is Max Clare. They bring over from Purdue, had over 700 yards receiving in the Big Ten. That's a spicy pickup because it kind of takes a little pressure off whoever it's going to be at quarterback, whether it's Lincoln Kindholz or whether it's Julian Sain. And Emeka Egbuka's gone. You're losing some pass-catching talent there, and obviously they're extremely talented at the receiver position with Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, Brandon Innes, and list goes on and on. But this is another guy at a position where it's been some time since they really kind of had that impact player since Jeremy Ruckert at the tight end position. So give them credit. They do a phenomenal job in really just kind of understanding who they are and letting the board really kind of fall to them.
You're giving Jeremiah Smith your nickname? That's high praise.
Nah. I was just messing with Coop. I want to get him fired up. He wasn't fired up about the LSU thing, so I just want to poke him a little bit.
To fire him up about Ohio State. How about Ole Miss? I mean, this is just what they do. They're the number 3 team once again, 28 total commits. But what is their hit rate on these guys?
He is the portal king. You know, you got to give him some credit there. I mean, his hit rate's pretty high, right? Andrew Ivins and I were talking about it this morning on the 105. Nice little plug there. But you think about Ole Miss, the guys that they had drafted this year, they had 8 players drafted. All 8 of them came via the transfer portal. So the Ole Miss has been way ahead of the curve on the transfer portal. I think when everybody was kind of sticking their toes in, trying to figure it out, they were already at the other side of the pool, head first, diving in on the transfer portal. And you think about Ole Miss over the last 3 years, because they're so invested in the transfer portal, you can't get off the train, okay? So the last 3 cycles, think about this. 28 players they took this year, 26 last year, 23 the year before that. We just talked about Oregon. They've kind of weaned themselves off now that they're going to build through high school and supplement via college. That is not the case with Ole Miss. Ole Miss is built to win now. They want to win now. And Lane Kiffin is saying, hey, I'm going to trust Billy Glasscock, Alex Brown, all these guys in my scouting department to continue to put us in a position to be successful. And they've done a good job via the high school, but the numbers have shifted more to the portal side. That's where they get their volume, and the high school side is where they kind of even out and balance out a little bit. But you still have guys like Austin Simmons, Suntarine Perkins, Kamarion Franklin, Xavier Harris, guys that they want to bring on through the high school ranks, William Eccles as well. They've really just kind of put a big focus in Mississippi. And with Mississippi State down right now, Jeff Levy trying to find his sea legs, it's like, let's just go get the top talent in this region, in the Gulf South, of the guys that fit us in the Magnolia State. And then everybody else will go out in the portal because we're a great portal destination, and financially we're going to invest in you, and then we're going to develop you, and then you're going to play in the SEC, and you're going to get a ton of eyeballs on you. So their formula right now is working, and I think people are just fatigued. They see them at number 3, and they're like, that's kind of what we expect. They're really, really freaking good. Luke has Patrick Kudus. You think about Princely Umanmielen as well. Prince Will Umanmielen, his brother just got drafted. These guys are just threading the needle with how they work in the transfer portal, and they're a joy to watch. And that's the cool thing about the portal. Depending on who you are, it can look a lot of different ways in terms of how you access it.
And Coop, you hit it right on the head. They've figured out who they are, and they can afford to be who they want to be because they can go out and spend it. High school, they don't have to go out. They don't have the resources to go get 5 of the top 10 guys. So you say, you know what, like you just said, we're going to go in Mississippi, get the best ones in Mississippi, and supplement our rest of our roster with guys that we can go out and purchase. Veterans that truly understand what they want and what we can get out of them. Because, again, Mississippi's kind of a different world to go out and recruit.
It is a different world, and I'll say this. Ole Miss this year, they were loaded last year. I love the experience that they got of preseason expectations. They haven't had a lot of those in Ole Miss over the years. Give Lane Kiffin a ton of credit. I'm more confident in this team. And I think, and listen, I like Jackson Dart. I'm a fan of his. I think Austin Simmons potentially has a higher NFL ceiling than Jackson Dart. And you think about the things that they brought in around him, it's going to be a really, really good team that I think a lot of people are saying, yeah, I know they're going to be a 9, maybe 10-win team. I think this could be a playoff team. So I'm excited to see him this year.
Ole Miss fans are loving to hear that. But our friend West Virginia is life right now on YouTube. It's like nails on a chalkboard to him. He says, Ole Miss is the most overrated team every year. We are sick of hearing of them.
Yeah, Coop, you said sick of something, but it ain't sick of hearing. It's sick of NFL players over and over and over again, hitting the portal, hitting the right guy. So you can be sick of production and results. Still a 10-win team, and we're talking about them being able to get into the playoffs this year, doing it their way.
I mean, we're talking about Ole Miss, right? No offense to them. We're not talking about LSU. We're not talking about Georgia. We're not talking about Florida
or Alabama.
Any of these blue bloods.
Yeah.
Lane Kiffin in the last 2 years has won 10 games in consecutive years. I don't know the last time that happened in Oxford, so you can call them overrated, but whatever. I mean, they're in a position they're in a position to go to the playoffs, and if you're Ole Miss, it's exactly where you want to be right now. April, somebody talking about your team, believing that they have enough talent to compete with the big boys in the SEC. That means you're doing your job at an extremely high level.
And we're not talking about anything negative. It's all positive of them constructing their roster the proper way.
Right.
Hey, West Virginia.
It's a 12-team playoff. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not.
I mean, this is Ole Miss's time to shine. This is when we talk about them a lot in the offseason. When you bring 28 players in, your school's going to come up once or twice in the
10
conversation.
wins. I think that's pretty darn good.
Yeah,
in
very
Oxford,
doable.
Mississippi.
I think so too. Getting back to the conversation at hand, what contenders did to fill their needs. Texas, we know defensive line was a big need. They just went out and got a whole new line, pretty much.
They went out and got exactly what they wanted. I mean, you look at that entire defensive line. All of those guys have starting ability, but they might just be rotational impact players. So we talked about Maryland being able to go in and get 4 defensive linemen, and this, like Texas went out and got tier 1 guys. Everybody wanted a lot of these players, but they went out and sealed the deal because, again, they have the resources to do that. And Brandon Harris and Coach Sarkisian have done a really, really good job of identifying players that fit what they want to do on the defensive side. And they understand that last year we went through the entire season and we kept on running up on a bully in Georgia. And what did Georgia do? Georgia lined up and ran the ball down their throat and physically manhandled them to the point that 3 of their offensive linemen got drafted this weekend. So what did B. Harris say? You know what? Not on my watch. Not anymore. I'm going to get more beef in Texas than we have cattle.
Right. I think Texas probably watched the Super Bowl and said, you know, I'm going to take a page out of Howie Roseman's book and we're just going to get as many frontline defenders as possible because we feel good about everything else. And they obviously do. They got Emmett Mosley out of Stanford. They needed another warm body there in the receiver room. He's a good player, too. But for Texas to go out there and grab 5 interior defensive linemen that can all play is extremely impressive. And they lost Alfred Collins, Vernon Broughton, Braden Sorrell. That's a lot of production. That's all leaving to go to the NFL. This is another one that's going to be fascinating to see kind of how they fit all the pieces together. But they were really, really, I would say, calculated about who they wanted. And you got a little bit of everything. You got guys that have 1 year left that got to figure it out. It's kind of a prove-it year. And then you have guys like Murad Watson, Hero Kanu, Lavon Johnson, are all guys that have played a little, showed potential, but need more experience. So they have developmental upside. So I love the way that they have kind of counterbalanced this and put the pieces to the puzzle together because they have guys that can impact the game right now, and then they have other guys that can add depth but also be above average starters later down the line.
And you create competitive juice on the defensive line. All guys want to do is play for 20 reps, maybe a game. Then the next guy comes in, it's like a platoon. You're just rolling and rolling. You're going to wear out the other side of the ball. They're not going to wear you down.
I will say, probably cost them a lot of money.
They got
probably
it.
well worth it.
They got it.
Yeah,
They
it'll
got
be okay.
it.
to get that beef down in Texas. Hey, when we're talking about teams filling needs, we have to discuss the number 1 transfer portal team, and that is LSU. So, Coop, what did they do to make them a contender?
Well, this secondary has been an Achilles heel under Brian Kelly for 3 years, and this is a place that prides itself on being called DBU. They made some poor hires out of the gate in the secondary. So what do? They go out, they get Corey Raymond, who has such a great reputation there in the state of Louisiana, and Corey Raymond has gotten to work. And we're not even talking about the high school side, what he's done there. So think about the guys that they brought in that secondary. Tamarcus Cooley, who's a guy that Smoke recruited out of high school. He loves him. Mansour Delane, that comes over from Virginia Tech, badly needed that type of position versatility, inexperience as well. And then Jakeem Jackson was another guy that Corey Raymond signed out of Gainesville and really liked at Florida. Ends up going to Baton Rouge with Corey Raymond, and a guy that we loved, has a ton of physical traits, 6'2", can run. Now is going to get the experience because they need bodies in there that look like NFL type of prospects. That's what we're used to seeing there in Baton Rouge. So I expect this unit who just signed Bernard Gooden and had Pat Payton and has Jack Pyburn and has Sadir Mitchell and Whit Weeks and Harold Perkins. This LSU defense, I don't know if it all comes together quickly, but if it does, it's got a chance to be pretty spicy.
Cool, but it's got to come into competition and come into all together in October, November. You have time. And you and I both know in the SEC at some point during the year, you're going to have to get to 3rd and 6, and you can't play zone. It's going to have smother cover, man-to-man, guys up front getting after the quarterback, tight covers on the back end. That's what we're used to in LSU. Now I think with the right personnel there, Coop, you're going to be drinking a lot of bourbon, cheering on, go Tigers, all year long.
And that week 1 game is going to be fantastic. I mean, I cannot wait to see that. The individual matchups in that game will be unbelievable. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, LSU travels to Clemson week 1. So it's funny to me because it's the exact opposite philosophies of Dabo Swinney and Brian Kelly. Not to say that Brian Kelly's been this portal maniac, but they have the number 1 class this year, and they're going to be relying on all those guys. So we'll see a clash of philosophies there in Death Valley.
And in that first week, you're going to find out, can your guys truly cover NFL caliber receivers with an NFL caliber quarterback play?
On both sides.
On both sides. Yep. It's going to be fun.
Battle of the Tigers, and who is the real Death Valley? Looking forward to that week 1. There's still some teams with lingering question marks when it comes to the transfer portal, and the first one we want to discuss is Florida State. Smoke, what is their lingering question mark after this player acquisition cycle?
Coop, who is backing up Thomas Castellanos? And I mean, who's going to be able to play in the style that he plays? RPO quarterback, dual threat guy, Brock Glenn. Nah, that ain't his game. So what happens if, and that's where we get into where the personnel guys come in, what happens if he goes down? Do you have a quarterback to come in and run the same system, the Gus Malzahn system, like he's running? Like we had some guys in the portal. You could have attacked them. What's your guy's name out of Ferris State that went to Ole Miss?
Yeah,
a guy
Trinidad
like
Chambers.
Yeah, a guy that can come in and do the same thing and give you the same type of production without going to a whole nother scheme.
Here's my question. What if Tommy Castellanos is not the answer? Then what do you do? And that's something that I've been kind of chewing on a little bit, and I don't know the confidence level there in Tallahassee. I thought this was interesting, an interesting marriage. They kind of went all in on Gus Malzahn. That's why you bring him in. Obviously leaning on him, Mike Norvell is, but this is a situation. If I was Florida State, especially learning the lessons of the last year where it didn't work out with DJU and Brock Glenn and Luke Romanoke, where I would have brought in 2 able bodies of guys that is saying, all right, if we don't have the answer here in Castellanos, is there another guy that we feel good about? And maybe that's Brock Glenn. I think I would have brought in one more quarterback, compete for the job.
Penn State, they needed to address the wide receiver position. They did a couple of days ago, Trevor Pena from Syracuse, but you said earlier in the show that you still think that they're missing that one guy. How do you evaluate their acquisitions when it comes to the wide receiver position?
I like what they've done, but here's my deal with Penn State. You're right there. You're right there. You just showed it, right? So, and think about this. When's the next time, if you're Penn State, you're going to have that type of offensive line, that type of running game with a 2-headed monster and Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, have a tight end room that I think could be one of the best in the countries with Luke Reynolds. And then the receivers that you bring in, I love Pena. I think he's a really good player. I think Ross is a dynamic guy that you can get involved in a lot of different ways. And then Kyron Hudson is just so darn solid. He's been that way since he's at high school. I want the over-the-top guy. Who is that big X receiver at 6'3", 6'4", dynamic that defensive coordinators have to account for at all times? Not to mention, Drew Aller is one of those guys that's being mentioned in the first round, could potentially be a top 10 pick. This right here is your window. So I'm trying to tell you, go. I'm nudging you. Go get your guy. Overspend if you have to. That guy, to me, would have been Ted Hurst out of Georgia State, who I think a lot of teams were going all in for. He ends up staying in Atlanta with Del McGee, so that ends up being fascinating. But they had plenty of swings. Even your guy Sincere Brown, who goes to Colorado. There were guys out there. We're talking about the deepest position in the transfer portal. I think there's almost 100 of these guys out of the top 500 players that we have. They almost account for a fifth of the top 500 ranked players, they could have taken swings on multiple guys. And I get it. I think they're comfortable. I think they're fine. What I'm saying is now is not the time to be comfortable. Now is the time to take some chances, go win the freaking thing, because I don't know how many times you're going to have a swing like this where you have the roster that you have. So if I were them, I would just say no questions going into the season. Don't leave any doubt, at least what it looks like on paper. And they're right there. And don't get me wrong. I love Penn State. I love the way they built this roster. I think they're just one more piece. Right now is the time to be greedy. That's what I would tell them.
Emily, you talked about earlier the combination of general manager and head coach. There's times that the general manager and head coach are too much alike, right? Like everything that happens in Penn State almost seems like it's just, that's just what we do at Penn State. At some point, you need somebody to come in and make sure that you're now uncomfortable saying, hey, coach, I know that we can run the ball. Our quarterback is real good. Play action pass and win. Okay, fine. But when we're playing against teams that we just need a dog outside, that we just need to go back and say, hey, listen, I don't care what the play is designed for. I'm going to kill, can, everything. Look out there and see my ex has one-on-one coverage with that guy. Throw the ball out to him. I don't care if it's a bubble or back shoulder fade. Go get it and win us the game. I think that's what Penn State is missing, a splash guy. But you have to have a splash type of personality somewhere, not the khaki pants, tucked in shirt. You got to have somebody a little bit wild that can come in and say, yo, you know what? He might not show up on time, but damn it, when he does show up, yeah, he's scoring 3 touchdowns, and everybody else is just behind him.
And we'll deal with it for a year.
That's it.
Right? That's it.
It's worth
We'll
it if
find
it brings
that guy.
you a national championship.
Every single time.
Absolutely. Talking about teams with some lingering question marks at the end of this transfer portal window. One of those, Texas. They don't have a question mark at quarterback. We know they got Arch Manning, but how did they address protection for their star QB, Coop?
I think they like what they have with Kyle Flood, the offensive line coach, and what he's been able to bring in. Now, you think about Texas and how they've been able to have the success that they've had there. A lot of it has to do with that 2022 signing class, and those guys were freaking elite across the board. Kelvin Banks, Cam Williams, Jake Majors in the middle. They're losing 3 to 4 offensive linemen, I think, this year. So you think about, all right, who are the guys protecting your franchise quarterback? And they got Trevor Gooseby, who's played and looked really good in spots and looks like a guy that they can be able to depend on. But what about right tackle? What about Brandon Baker? And what does that look like, right? And Brandon Baker was a guy that we went back and forth on. Is he a tackle or is he a guard? And going up against the speed in the SEC, that's going to be put on display every single week, and it's going to be tested. So my thing is, same thing with Penn State. You have this guy at quarterback that everybody is ready to crown and say he's the next big thing. And he very well might be. And we love what we've seen out of Arch Manning. The rest of the team, even with all that talent that left, is ready to go. Texas has been unbelievable the way that they've acquired talent and stockpiled talent. But if you had that one spot, it would be like, let me just make sure I got a tackle that I can bring in and push Brandon Baker. And if he's not good enough, I got another guy that I can rely on. And yeah, maybe you have to overpay for that insurance policy. But what we've seen out of Texas and what we know is they're not scared to spend money. So I would have thought they would have been a little bit more aggressive on the offensive line in the trenches to go out and make sure that, hey, if it doesn't work here, we got to make sure that we protect arguably the most marketable face in all of college football for the next 2 years, right? So I'm going to be fascinated to see what that looks like. And maybe I'm wrong. I could be dead wrong. Maybe they love Brandon Baker and it's all good. But if that was me, at least from where I'm sitting, very far away from Austin, I wonder, okay, what's this going to look like in the fall?
Yeah, you're just saying it the right way from a personnel standpoint. You get it. I know coaches going to say, hey, we can get these guys developed, but you're going in saying, hey, you know what? I want to be so sure that if it goes wrong, I still can get it right. And that's just adding in a veteran swing offensive tackle that can come in. If B. Baker's having one of those days that he might need to go in and play guard, you might just bump him in a guard. Or if you get that veteran tackle, you say, you know what? Brandon's best position is guard. We don't have to force him to play tackle right now. And we can develop him into a tackle year down the line.
Yeah, and I think, last point on this, if you're one of those national championship teams, we saw that with Ohio State, it is important to be able to play chess on the offensive line. but you need enough pieces, and you really need 7. We saw that with Ohio State. They had to kick out Donovan Jackson to left tackle. You think about Notre Dame, what they had to do. They had to move Charles Jagasaw all over the place as well. Anthony Knapp was another guy that was ready to go. So that offensive line depth is really, really important. And I think for Texas, if they start leaking a little bit, that's going to be interesting to kind of see how they fill those holes.
And leaking happens. It happened to Bama last year when Tyler Book had to go play left tackle.
Speaking of Alabama, you said that they're a team that needed an edge rusher but did not get one. Portal's closed. What do you think about the position group?
They got a lot of bodies there. A lot of upside, a lot of potential in names, but not a lot of production. And I wanted them to just go out and spend a little bit more, Courtney, and get a proven 8-sack guy. Someone that can come in and close out those 3rd and 6 that you don't have to dial up blitzes. You don't have to dial up schemes to get guys free. I just know that we don't have a guy that I've seen for 3 years now, Coop. And I know that the high school rankings were true. That has nothing to do with their overall development. Development has to go now with coaches and player. Coaches giving the player what to do and the player being able to do it repeatedly. They just don't have a guy that can go out and close games out. The Dallas Turners of the world, the Braswells of the world, the Tim Williams of the world anymore.
Can we pull that full screen back up, because this is interesting to me. Like, think about these names: Keon Keeley, one of those guys; Jaquavius Rousseau, Yanze Pierre. Keeley was the highest ranked defensive player when he came out. Yanze Pierre was another 5-star. Jordan Renaud was a guy that we had in the top 247. Same with Quay Rousseau. Same with Kelby Collins. LT Overton was another guy that's a 5-star and is on a really good trajectory, but more of a guy that's going to play inside. They got to grow up, and they got to earn the money that they are making. That's really what it comes down to. I'm fascinated to kind of see what it looks like. I'm with you philosophically, but if I'm Kalen DeBoer, I'm saying, what are we doing? Because if these guys can't produce now, then we got to move on, and then we got to go in a different direction. But the talent is all there, and if those guys were to go into the portal, their phone would be ringing off the hook.
And maybe through spring that we don't know. I only went down there for a practice, and they did look like they're getting better. But getting better and closing games out on Saturdays in Death Valley in a playoff game are two different things. Practice and game, different atmosphere.
Yeah, to Coop's point, plenty of teams across the country would look at that depth chart and say, yeah, I'll take that all day long when it comes to Alabama. 5,000 total players. That's how close we were to that number hitting in the transfer portal during this cycle. So there's a lot to learn, a lot to take away. Coop, what are your final thoughts as we close out this transfer portal cycle?
I think the portal is so fascinating. I love studying it. I think it's kind of this wild thing that a lot of people can't really put their finger on and kind of figure out a little bit. And what I mean by that is, I'll give you 3 examples. You look at USC, Oklahoma, LSU, all changed coaches in the same year in the same offseason, right? And a lot of that had to do, Lincoln Riley leaves to go to USC, Brent Venables goes to Oklahoma. Brian Kelly comes from Notre Dame to LSU. And you think about this with Oklahoma, LSU, and USC, all 3 of these programs, I think, through 3 years, have left a little bit to be desired. But instead of the seat warming up and instead of the doubt creeping in, what happens is now you're able to really kind of get your ducks in a row and allocate resources to push it all in to say, you know what, in the short term, we're gonna get the gravy train back rolling again, and we're gonna push to get this thing right. You've seen it with LSU, #1 ranked portal class in the country. You've seen it now with Oklahoma and what they've done with John Mateer, Jaden Ott, some of the other guys that they brought in. USC has kind of dialed it back a little bit because they want to go into high school. We talked about Ole Miss being able to thread the needle. What's it look like with Purdue and North Carolina and how they're able to kind of raise the expectations in year one. So everybody views the portal a little bit differently, and I think the biggest thing that ties it all together is, where are you with the short-term expectations? But if you're able to deliver on the short-term expectations, then it's able to get you back on track long-term. Oregon's the best example. They wanted to compete right away under Dan Lanning. They have done that in his first couple years there. The way that they did that was bringing in talent that was already mature and can play. Now, by doing that, they supplemented that with top 5 recruiting classes. So while all those other guys have been impacting their team and their organization, that young talent has been growing and developing. And now Oregon says, all right, time to change gears. We don't need 20, 15-plus players in the transfer portal. We'll take our 10, and we're going to take 10 of the best guys. And that's what we're going to do. So I think it all depends about the stages of where you are in your program. I talk about brand awareness all the time. But I find it truly fascinating. Auburn is a great case study because if they go out and they win this year, I think it's one of those teams, they've recruited their tails off via high school. And then all of a sudden you can see them going, all right, we don't need 20 guys. We'll take 10, right? So that has been, I think, the most enjoyable thing for me to watch is how teams play chess in the portal.
Yeah, and just understanding 5,000 names. A lot of names you got to evaluate. I saw your computer this morning when you were just going away at it. I don't think people understand how much film you actually watch.
My brain is mush.
Man, your brain is sharp. But just understanding that every team needs to play the game that they know how to play. Afford to who you can afford to be. And I say that by, like, you have the Ohio States, the Penn States, the blue blood teams that can really go through, still do it through the high school way, but supplementing their team the proper way by getting the right needed players that they can afford. And now you have to say, coaches, you have to pay more attention to your personnel staff. You have to be more intentional on who you're hiring to understand the way that you want to set up your recruiting board, your portal board, your anticipation board. Mm-hmm. Because we know that if you're not anticipating and setting yourself up for wins, you're really losing. Like, you shouldn't be going through spring not knowing what you need. You should be going through spring at the end of spring saying, okay, these are the positions that we're going to attack, and here goes the 10 guys that we need to either anticipate that they're coming out by nudging and saying, come on out, or understanding that we might need to dip down to Division II, FCS, to go get a Joe Cotton, to go get our guy from West Point. I'm saying those might be the two best players in the cycle. But if you didn't do further research and have really good eyes to develop your team, yeah, you're missing out.
Last point I'll make, you're going to see some teams this year that I think a lot of teams are saying, well, Mississippi State, they stunk last season, right? Vandy, yeah, well, it's just Vandy. And it's like, if you look at these teams and what they've done in the portal, they've been able to take the momentum of what they were able to do. Vandy, for example, what they were able to do last year, and they continue to increase the talent profile of their team. There are teams out there that are very sneakily attractive. Georgia Tech, Louisville, Wisconsin has done some really fascinating things. There's teams that conventionally can't live in the high school world of going up against some of the bigger teams in their conference. So what they're saying is, we'll get that bounce back talent in the portal that's underdeveloped or maybe wants more opportunity. And I think we saw parity at an all-time high last year. I think it's just going to get continued to get closer and closer and closer and more competitive in a lot of these conferences. So I'm fascinated to see that. And there's a lot of teams doing some really, really kind of fun stuff that I think is going to be more enjoyable as a football fan to watch that in 2025.
Coaching matters, and talent acquisition matters a ton.
Mm-hmm. And you have these proof of concepts as well. We talked about Ole Miss as a team that, yes, this is who they are. They continue to live in the portal. But when you see what happens over the weekend and a lot of those players get drafted, well, then you just keep being able to acquire that great talent. And so the strategy is just so interesting.
If I'm a young man that's out there, Coop, and I say, you know what, what's the best school that I can go to in the SEC right now? Line up, being able to play the right amount of snaps, right system. Yeah, I might check into Oxford.
Right.
And I'm going to get paid too.
Yeah. And listen, there were some character concerns about Walter Nolan. Ole Miss only had him for a year. Mm-hmm. They had Princely Umami Ellen for 2 years, right? So they're able to kind of mitigate it and then dangle the carrot to say, hey, listen, we'll pay you. And then on top of it, you got to show up, you got to play because the next level is right around the corner. I expect that for Pat Payton at LSU. He's got 1 year to figure it out, right? So a lot of these guys incentivized, motivated to cash in at this level and the next one at their last stop.
It's like the old New England formula. New England used to get vets that was at the end of their careers but needed that one good year to come in to hit free agency. They'll go get them. They'll play their best year. They'll get rid of them, but they'll be really good.
Find the next guy.
Find the next guy. Good on behavior, good on time, on task, good production. Yeah, we've done our job. Just get out of our building. All we want to do is win. We don't have anything to do with your character when you leave. But while you're here, just play good guy.
seemed to work out all right for the New England Patriots as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
They won a few Super Bowls, so that's a good blueprint to take from. And now we've got that in college football with Bill Belichick in North Carolina, so we'll continually see what he does there. Chapel Bill, thank you guys so much for all the great intel on this Transfer Portal Palooza recap show. They have been grinding. You're not giving yourself enough credit. Smoke's been grinding the tape as well.
Just a little bit. I ain't on your level yet, Chris. Man.
There are so many players to go through, so we appreciate these guys' hard work, and we will continue to work to bring you some great content this week because we have another live commitment coming up tomorrow. Cornerback Caden Harris, the number 92 overall prospect, is finalist. You see the logos there. We got Auburn, Notre Dame, Georgia, Mizzou, and Vanderbilt. Thank you once again for watching Transfer Portal Palooza. Hit the like button on the way out and make sure you are subscribed to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel.